Okay, ready? Hi, I'm Ann. Welcome to or welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I am not alone currently. I have my wonderful husband, Zach, who is being
Alone.
silly. What?
I am always alone.
Always alone. Always alone. So, today we are going to be reviewing The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I'll put the cover here.
Right here.
Okay.
I tried doing that.
I won't keep it up because our faces are too big. But here's the thing. So I don't read that much fantasy, and Zach reads
A lot.
almost exclusively either sci-fi or fantasy. So I thought it would be better to bring in a resident expert because for me, I really struggle with reading fantasy and sci-fi. And we'll get to my struggles with this book in a minute. So we're going to do mostly a non-spoiler review, and then we're going to get to short spoilers where Zach will rant a little bit about the ending. So what is this story about? It is a Norse Viking-inspired fantasy. It follows three groups of people, kind of. We have, three perspectives, I will say. I don't think we ever switch out of those three perspectives. The first one is Orca. No. She is introduced as living with her family, her husband and her young son, outside areas.
They live alone in their own tiny little walled off house.
Yes, exactly.
In the middle of the woods.
Yep. And she and her husband have a past. We unravel it as the story goes on. And so we follow her. She's also a warrior, I guess. That's not exactly a spoiler because we learned that relatively early on that she's good at fighting. And then the second group is...
You have to be a fighter or you have to die. Those are the only two options.
Yeah, exactly. This is a very warlike world. And then the second character is Vogue, and he is a thrall?
Yes.
Thrall, who is... they're like the slave caste of this world. Well, we don't learn exactly how he became free, but he's kind of free and he's traveling to fulfill a quest, basically. And that's where we pick up with him. Third character is Elvar, and she's this part of this mercenary group that's traveling around hunting down these tainted. So basically in this world, there were this epic god fight, like 1,000 years ago or something. I don't know how long ago.
I think it's like 300 years.
300 years? Okay, that's less than I thought. But 300 years ago where the gods fought and they killed each other, basically. But there are some of their children that are still alive that are like technically like part god, but part human, and they're called the Tainted.
Yeah, it's like, here are the gods, here are their first children, and then the next one, and so on and so on and so on. So the Tainted that are still alive nowadays have just a tiny little bit of god blood in them, but it just enough to make them, tainted.
Yes, exactly. So Elvar's group of mercenaries are going around hunting down these people basically for money. I mean, we learn more of their motivations as it goes on. So those are the three groups. So yes, it's a very brutal world.
Full of fantastic creatures.
Yes.
Most of them want to kill the characters that meet them, but that's okay.
It's a very bloody world. I won't say it's like Game of Thrones where like all your fair characters would die immediately,
no.
But it is where Gwyn is willing to kill off some of his main characters as it goes along, like to progress the plot. It's not super bloody like Game of Thrones, but it is.
The characters do not have very much plot armor.
No, exactly. That's a good way to put it.
They've got like leather plot armor instead of plate mail plot armor.
Yeah. So let's get to our likes and dislikes. I'll go first with dislikes because I have a feeling you don't have many dislikes.
No, it's the best book ever. Greatest book in existence. I would put it on the level of I don't read as much. I don't know what a highly rated book is. Lord of the Rings. That's a good book. I'd put it above, like, here's Lord of the Rings, here's anything written by John Gwynne.
Oh, okay, all right. I wouldn't do that. I would say Lord of the Rings and like John Gwynne is like right below. But I also haven't read as much John Gwynne as Zach has, and I also idolize Tolkien, so like I may be biased.
I am biased.
But I will say I had some struggles with this book. There are a lot of characters. For example, just in Elvar's point of view, like what do they call it? Not Bloodsworn. No, Bloodsworn are Vogs.
Battlegrim.
Battle Grimm. Battle Grimm is the mercenary group she is part of. There are at least, like, I'd say half a dozen main characters around her. And then there's probably like a dozen more that are like mentioned
Every
along.
once in a while, you know. Oh, yeah, there's Joe over there. Who's that again? Oh, yeah, no, he was mentioned on page 63. He's the guy that made the soup that one night.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like small detailed characters that for me, because I don't read that much fantasy, I really struggled with that because I couldn't keep track of like who was who. I could recognize the main characters that kept coming up or like the main characters that were around the main characters, but I couldn't keep track of just how many characters there was. Like there was this queen lady that is kind of... Queen Helga that is kind of in charge of most of the kingdom that this story takes place in. And there's a lot of people having to do with her and then having to do with different cities that the characters travel to. It's just a lot to keep track of. There's a lot of world building in there and it's good world building, but it's also a lot for, if you're not super familiar with reading fantasy books, it's a lot to kind of read.
And for me, every book that I've read since I was like 10 has had at least 3 different character perspectives in it. Mm-hmm. So I read this and I was like, yeah, this is nothing. There's only 3 different ones. I've read a book with like 8 different characters one time. This is fine.
Yeah. Whereas for me, it was a lot harder because I usually read perspectives that have like 2 perspectives at the most. And when I do read fantasy, usually it's like YA, which is lazy fantasy. I'm sorry. I'm not a huge fan of YA fantasy. My likes. Oh, the characters are very well done. It's interesting to see how they have... Each character has like a goal. Elvar has less of a goal. I feel like she's just with the group going
she's
along with
just, I want to be my own person. That is her goal.
With Orca and with Vogue, they have very clear motivations, even though those goals don't exactly go with what's happening with the rest of the plot. It pushes the story forward. So basically all the characters have very strong motivations. And I think that makes for a very provoking plot because if you're not working on one person's goal, you're working on the other person's goal and vice versa.
So for example, usually for me, when I read a lot of books with a lot of different perspectives. There's usually at least like one where I'm like, I don't really care what's going on with this person. Just get me back to the other group so I can... What, they got into a fight? I don't care about this random guy. I want to see the fight. But with this book, every time it switched perspectives, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we get to pick up where these guys left off. Okay, we get to see what's going on with them.
Yeah, I will say Orca was probably my favorite perspective. Especially early on, I liked her perspective. And then Vogue, I liked his later on. I think that was my favorite later on.
Vogue was always my favorite perspective. I always was really curious what was going on.
Yeah. Well, and that's another element I really liked in this book is even though it's a fantasy, obviously I read a lot of mysteries. So it surprisingly has a lot of elements of mystery because you're kind of unfolding who are these characters, what are their actual motivations. Like with Vogue, you don't quite know what he's after for most of the book, or at least for like half of the book, you're kind of piecing together what are his motivations and what his goal is. Yeah. And so it reads like a mystery in many ways, and I like that because I love mysteries.
It's a very well done mystery because, I'll try and do this without giving any spoilers, but basically Vogue he has a goal. He knows what's going on. You as the reader do not. So very slowly as he talks to other people about what he's trying to do, so talking to some random character, blah, 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 and then you as the reader, you go, Oh, that's who that is. That's why you care. Oh, and then it just kind of continued on like that throughout the whole story until you get close to the end and you kind of piece it all together and you're like, wait. Mm-hmm. And like it happens with me for every one of his books. When the last like 2 to 3 hours of the book, I'm like, I need to read it all right now.
Yeah, and we'll talk about spoilers in a minute because the ending does... it's much more of a journey for most of the book. Like these characters are traveling from place to place. We're learning more about what's going on. But in the end, this might be a spoiler, everything comes together. Let's say that. Everything comes together. And even though there's things that are left open, a lot of things that are left open for the sequel, there is a lot that is like brought together in the ending. And that was well done. But I would say Elvar was not my favorite perspective. I didn't dislike her. Like, I liked her perspective and I liked what was going on with her, because it was very important to know that people were like hunting the tainted and what was going on with that. However, like herself as a perspective, I didn't enjoy her as much, or a lot of the decisions she made. Like, she has a guard who is protecting her. I can't remember his name. Grund, and he is sworn to protect her, and she makes decisions sometimes that puts his life in danger, and it's not purposefully like she's doing things, but
she does not think forward very much.
Yes, she doesn't think forward, and so it was frustrating for me where, like, especially with him, where I liked him and I wanted him to survive, and I was like, stop doing things that are going to get him killed.
Stop doing dumb things.
Exactly. But all the perspectives were relatively good. Elvar was a level lower for me than the other two, personally.
My one dislike was, I like a lot of perspectives. They had, 3 perspectives. And then each of those had, a few different, like, main characters, arguably, and then a few different side characters. And that's totally fine. I could follow along. The one thing I didn't like, though, would be, like I said, you have a side character, Joe, who made the soup that one night on page 63. He will not now be mentioned again for the next, 200 pages. Oh, hey, Joe! Thanks for saving my life in that battle, or whatever. And it wasn't terrible, but it was just kind of like, personally, I'm pretty good at remembering, so I remember him. But it's just kind of weird that it would be like, oh, he's mentioned one time, and then one other time, 200-300 pages later, and then that was it. And
there were quite a few times that a character would pop up, and I could get the reference that, oh, we met them before, but because I have a horrible memory, I would not remember at all where we met them, who they were. Mm-hmm. So I had issues with that, but I just, glazed over it because I didn't recognize them.
But as far as likes go, it was very good world building, and for me, because I know a decent amount about Norse mythology, which is what this is based on and stuff. It was really cool to me to see all the things that were obviously inspired by Norse mythology. For example, this I don't think is too much of a spoiler, but they're talking about one of the old gods and one of his storied punishments, and he's basically, here was the rat god who spread all these rumors. And his punishment was that he was tied down with snakes dragging venom across him all the time. So I'm like, oh, it's like Ratataskar, the Norse god who spread rumors, but who got punished the way that Loki got punished, by having snakes drip venom onto him all the time. So I thought there was a lot of stuff like that, which I picked up on. Okay. I thought was really cool that it's different, but it's very obviously inspired by Norse mythology, and I can see where it comes together sometimes like that.
Yeah. Interesting, because I didn't pick up any of those because I'm not familiar with Norse mythology outside of Thor and Loki and the Avengers, which is not actually mythology.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't pick up on a lot of those. But I will say that whether you know a lot of fantasy or don't know a lot of fantasy, I think you will enjoy this book, because for me, on I guess more shallow level, I still enjoyed it, even not being familiar with fantasy, not being familiar with Norse mythology. I could still enjoy the characters and the plot without getting a lot of the references. But if you do get a lot of the references like Zach did, then there's that other higher level that you can enjoy the book. So it's a book that can be enjoyed by both your
both groups of people.
Your beginner fantasy reader as well as your advanced fantasy reader, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Was there any other dislike or likes, I should say?
I mean, everything. I really love the book. If I haven't mentioned it already, definitely my favorite author. For a reason. So, yes, likes, yes, everything.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely enjoyed this. I took my time with this more than I read Malice by John Gwynne. And with that, I listened to the audiobook 2 times the speed the entire way through, and I missed a lot of things. So when it came to the end and things were wrapping up, I was like, what's going on? So I But with this one, we both listened to it on an audiobook, and I listened to it very slowly. I started at 1.25 speed, and then I went to 1.5 times speed. And that, for me, I was able to pick up a lot more. So it's a book that you can't rush through or skim it. And you have to like take your time learning the world.
Normally, even I listen to most audiobooks at 2 times speed, and I could have listened to this one at 2 times. In fact, when I read Malice for the first time, I also listened to it at 2 times speed. But, by the end of that book is right about when I was getting familiar enough, because I could understand what they were saying, because especially like names and stuff, at double speed in an almost foreign language, it's like, I don't know what anything is. But even this one, I could have read it faster. Or listened faster. I listened to it at like just normal speed the entire time, just because I wanted to take my time and really wanted to appreciate it, because things felt a lot more impactful listening at 1 times speed, I felt like. Because at double speed, okay, they're in a fight and they're out of a fight, and okay, and they're back into one, whereas at 1 times, I had time to get used to them not being in a fight, or to whatever was happening. Everything felt a little bit more heavy, I guess.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, it's a book that you can rush through, and it will be a fun fantasy, but to take your time with it, it's a lot more, because when twists come, you're like, I've spent so much time with these characters that now when this twist comes, it's a lot more impactful. Mm-hmm. So, do you want to do a short spoiler section?
Sure.
So, Vogue joins a group called the Bloodsworn. And basically, they're highly trained warriors. In the beginning, that's what we think they are. And then, in the end, it is revealed that they are tainted.
They are all tainted.
They are all tainted, including
Every
Vogue.
single one of them is almost like a demigod.
Yeah. Basically. So that was a cool twist.
And it made Vogue's story add up so much more, because he's the descendant, not the son of, I should say, but like a descendant of like the wolf god in this world. Ulfric?
I don't remember.
I can't pronounce any of the god
names.
So it makes a lot of things add up, because throughout the book, when he's fighting, his story is, I was a slave and I fought for my master for bets and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I never lost. I've never fought in my life except for this, but he's really, really good at it. Yeah. And it's like, that's kind of weird. And then while you're actually on his perspective fighting, he'll talk about, I could feel like this red rage burning in me, but I always fought it back. I'm like, like, on one hand, that could be, in what you assume it to be throughout the whole book is, it's just anger, and but then you get to the end and you think about it and you're like, wait a minute, he was fighting this whole time. Wait a minute, that's why he prefers to like fight with like his fist and stuff like that. Oh, wait a minute, and it all kinds of stuff just adds up like that.
There's also a point in the book where he fights a dragon tainted and actually kills him, and at that point I was like, well, he can't be human or something, because there's no way he would be able to fight like a tainted with very little experience of actual fighting and then just like beat him.
Yeah, because when he fights this like dragon tainted, it's the first time he's in a real fight. There's a couple of times earlier where the whole group like gets into a fight, but it's almost over before it begins, because it's more of just a little like a bar brawl, stuff like that. So in his first real battle, he's actually fighting, and he like kills one of the like strongest people, and it's like, you had no training?
Seems suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Orca, a lot happens with, relatively early on, her husband is killed, and then her son is taken by this group. They're the Raven Feeders?
Yeah, Raven Feeders.
Raven Feeders. So she's tracking down her son for most of the book. So I didn't want to give it away in spoilers, because her husband does die like maybe a fourth into the book or something like that. And so I think it's after the point where you don't want to give spoilers.
Yeah.
But, so for most of the book, she's traveling with herself and with 2 brothers. But it is also revealed relatively early on that her husband was a bear tainted.
Right. Well, when he dies, when she finds out that he dies,
Yeah. And then her son would also be tainted. Do we learn if she's tainted at all? We don't learn in this book, I don't think.
Technically, no.
But you have your suppositions.
Well, she was part of that battle group where everyone was tainted, which leads me to assume that
was her husband, though. Yeah. Yes, in the very end of the book, it is revealed that her husband was the old leader of the Bloodsworn, which is the group that Vogue is now part of. Mm-hmm. So we learned that in the end. But I guess she could have been...
She could have not been part of the group. I don't know. But it makes me assume that she's probably also tainted.
Especially with how good she fights. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense. And then with Elvar's group, there's a lot of twists, but in the end of the book, they are betrayed by one of their own members. And the leader of the Grimm, what are they called? Battle Grimm is killed. So Elvar's leader. And then a lot of their group is actually killed.
The leader died mid-battle.
Yeah.
And that's when the book ends.
Yes.
Right after that battle.
Yes,
so
but it also has a cool ending because there's actually... So the whole point that the Raven Feeders are not only kidnapping Orca's son, but they're kidnapping all children that are tainted because they want to complete this ritual on this place, near this tree where the gods actually fought, and the ritual awakens a dragon god.
So as the story goes, which you hear a few times throughout it, is Leek Reefer, the only god name I can pronounce because she's the only one that's still alive, basically started the war between the gods by... I was told I'm not allowed to swear, so I can't say what I was going to say. But she started the war by being a terrible person, basically, and so she's been imprisoned. So she misses the whole battle between all the gods.
Yeah. And the Raven Feeders wake her up. So at the very end of the book, the last, 25 pages or something, she gets woken up and comes out and kills the guardians, I guess, who were guarding her to keep her within her imprisonment.
So earlier, as I said, here are the gods, and here are their children, and here are the, everyone else, descendants of their children, probably. Well, their children are very much, they're very, very godly. So the three, guardians of this dragon were three children of one of the other gods, and it goes badly.
Yes, it does, and the dragon escapes in the end. So that's where we leave off. We have the Battle Grimm kind of being destroyed. I guess they're just kind of alive.
Decimated.
Yeah, well, they're decimated.
The thing is, they lose the battle, but the battle was barely even a battle because basically the Raven Feeders had sent just enough people to keep the Battle Grimm busy so they could just go and do their ritual. And then as soon as the ritual is done, they, all right, men, move out. You can't see that. That's, all right, men, move out. And they just left.
Yeah.
And basically all the Battle Grimm who may or may not have been alive, because they didn't bother to check, they were just like, you're not worth the time anymore. You were in the way, you no longer are. Let's keep going and doing what we're doing.
Yeah, that's basically what happens. So we don't know what's going to happen to the Battle Grimm. We do have the Bloodsworn meeting up with Orca, so I assume she's going to join them. But she didn't actually find her son. I assume he was at the ritual, but we don't actually know for sure if he was, because she did rescue some of the children, but not all of them. So we don't know where her son is. So, and then the dragon is released. So that's the ending of this book. And then the second book is going to be coming out in about a month, and hopefully...
Not even a month, it's like April 12th.
Something, yeah. And I'm going to order it from the library, and hopefully we'll get it relatively soon after it comes out, and then we'll do this again.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Any last thoughts?
It was a great book. Any book by John Gwynne you should go and read. Best author I've ever read.
You can say it with such a straight face.
I can. Everyone tells me I've got a great poker face.
You do. Anyway, so if you've read this book, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you haven't read this book, but you've read other books by John Gwynne, How do you enjoy his writing in general?
They're great. It's all great.
I know you're biased.
I'm not biased.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Saturday and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.
Bye.